It's my pleasure to introduce you all to John Alban, legendary winemaker here in California with a great story. He is the reason we are drinking some really amazing Syrah and Viognier here in California. Hi, John.
Good morning, Ian.
How are you doing?
Wonderful. Thank you for including me in your interview.
I love talking to legends. How did you end up getting into the wine world? What was it that made you decide to do this?
I come from a family with no affiliation to the wine trade, but my dad loved wine as a consumer. He was not an aficionado. He just enjoyed wine every night. And I grew up in a very liberal household. So I was tasting wines with my dad from before I can remember. By the time I was 8 years old, I was helping him catalog wines. And as I grew up, I started to put together we're missing a lot of stuff in California because we really just at that time drank what I call two flavors, Cabernet, Chardonnay, which were chocolate and vanilla. And I wondered if there might be something I could do to add a few more flavors to our quiver.
What year were we in there?
Well, that would date me somewhat, but we're talking about the late 60s and into the early 70s.
Wow. And so the process was that you decided to get involved in the viticulture.
Well, I really didn't know anything about what I was deciding. I was so naive, but that's the only reason this worked. Uh, at a certain point, I had finished every logical explanation for why I might be in school anymore. And faced with having to go out into the real world, I decided to continue my education in viticulture and enology in the quest of what would these other flavors be.
And you did that at Davis, or where did you go to school?
uh, I was so confused that I ended up going through the entire graduate program at both Fresno State and Davis, uh, which again just relates to how little I knew about what I was even embarking upon.
You didn't know not to. That's great. Well, so you got started when did you put vines in the ground for the first time? What year?
I started grafting over other people's vines just to get a sense of where I'd even want my vines, but also to propagate vines. Because since I was going to grow things that hadn't been imported into the US yet, I needed vines just to make more vines. And I started with test blocks in the San Joaquin Valley, in what's now called the Templeton Gap, in the Hecker Pass. I had some in Santa Barbara County, and ultimately a few in the Edna Valley. And that started in the mid 80s and continued through to about 1991 when I stuck my claim once and for all on what is now Alban Vineyards in the Edna Valley of San Luis Obispo.
All right. Well, I got a little slideshow just with a couple of pictures, kind of anchor the conversation. Nice jacket.
That's what I wear when I'm on the tractor.
Yes, I'm sure of it. Yeah.
Nothing says farmer like that coat.
Outstanding. And just out of curiosity, did you have any other varietals that you decided not to go with?
So many. It's crazy. And it's crazy fun for me to see a number of them start to become significant in California. I toyed with the idea, Ian, of wines from Provence. I looked at possibly Jura with Vin Jaune, but I quickly put together that I'm just about the only person in California who likes Vin Jaune. So quickly moved on from that. I looked at Sauvignon Vert, which is not a Sauvignon, and in fact is starting to pop up in places. The one variety I was really on the fence about was Grenache Blanc.
Mm.
And I felt like Vieux Telegraph was the only winery really making an exceptional Grenache Blanc, but it's been wonderful to see it proliferate subsequently in California and many others. But one thing I learned early on is it's easy to dilute your efforts by chasing all the things you love. The fact that I love a wine does not mean I should or need to make that wine.
Yes, I've learned some of those lessons myself, the hard way too. So you landed in San Luis Obispo, which is also a little frontiering at that time, right?
It's changed so much. I wish I had the exact numbers, but my recollection was when I embarked upon this, there were fewer than 2 dozen wineries in Paso Robles. And there were about 8 wineries South County, which is where I am. Today, last I saw, there's over 400 wineries in Paso Robles area.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, the expansion of brands has been insane, but it's also been aided by the fact that people figured out that if they have a license for 25,000 cases and they're not using it, they can allow people to use part of their license and get started because the cost of entry used to be immense.
That that was an aspect that changed my life, what we have always called custom crush. The fact that wineries, large wineries, will often lease out space to other folks to make small amounts of wine. Because as you're alluding, you can't buy a 25th of a forklift. And the forklift that can easily service 25,000 cases of wine, uh, you got to buy the whole thing if you're going to make 500 cases of wine.
Yeah.
Presses aren't too dissimilar. There are little tiny presses, but they are not at little tiny prices.
Very good. And so you're considered the first American winery and vineyard established exclusively for Rhone varieties. And
That that's true, and it's a statement that's always perhaps been harder for folks to understand the real significance of it. And the real significance of it is that there were at the time a lot of wineries dabbling in a whole potpourri of varieties and regions. But when you stake your claim on one thing and you start from the ground up, you can really shape it. There's two parts. You can shape it to perfection to the best of your ability. You're not compromising. And two, you kind of have to do that because you don't have a safety net to fall back on. It's one thing to make 200 cases of Viognier and 10,000 cases of Chardonnay. Then the Viognier is something you're toying with, or there's an inherent statement in those numbers. If that's the only thing you do, then you are obliged to be 100% committed. You have jumped out of the plane.
yeah, very good. And how would you describe the climate in San Luis Obispo? Why is it optimal for Rhone varieties?
One of the most radical things I did at the time, and only with hindsight, I was so naive, I had no idea what radical even meant, was instead of just looking at regions by the Davis system of heat summation, I looked at how do the great vintages of the Northern Rhone compare to the Davis system of the average vintage of the Northern Rhone. And what distinguishes them is unusual warmth preceding and during harvest. And so I looked at areas in California where that's the norm, where areas that have unusual warmth in late September and October. And the coastal valleys of California are renowned for that. Uh, In fact, it's what you refer to as Santa Ana's. Uh, and that is what had me very excited about this area.
Hmm, very good. We're now going to taste some great Viognier with John Alban, and we'll do it virtually. We'll taste these wines live with our audience, John. But uh, what is it about Viognier that you get excited about? What can we find in your 2023?
What you can find in that wine and what you should find in any Viognier that's living up to what Viognier promises is that the aromatics should immediately jump out of the glass. If you've never had Viognier before, the moment you pull the cork, you should make some kind of sound besides the pop, something along the ooh, because Viognier has flowers and deep fruit notes that literally jump out of the glass. The other part you should zero in on is the textural component. Because of the aromatic varieties, Viognier is the only one that can have body and length of finish without residual sugar. Riesling can do that, but it has sweetness. Gewürztraminer can do it, but it has sweetness. They also need the sweetness to cover up any potential bitterness. That's where Viognier diverges, and in my opinion, it's the only reason for why Viognier didn't go extinct.
Some amazing florals popping out of the glass. And you do this particular bottling entirely in stainless steel?
It's about 80 plus percent stainless steel, 10% terracotta, and about 5%, that's why I say 80 plus percent, 5% very well seasoned older oak barrels. Uh,
Cool.
but yes, dominated by the stainless component for sure.
And we look at some of the classic descriptions of Viognier, and a word that I love is the honeysuckle, maybe blossoms or peaches. Um, there you go. It's just from a definition of Viognier. And uh, is your Viognier something that you were able to bring back? Because you're the name on Viognier. Like people can plant Alban clone Viognier, right?
Yes, and a number of Rhone varieties. And that just stemmed from being being the first to start this literally from the ground up with a focus exclusively on Rhone varieties. I didn't want to have any surprises or mistakes. California nurseries have a long history of being confused about what materials they in fact have. And what would be more embarrassing than to put myself out as the first to be doing this, only to discover I wasn't doing this?
Right. Are some
So
noted
I,
examples of that.
I did my own importations of many of the varieties.
Well, this particular bottling was awarded 93 points by Jeb Dunnick, and fits the description that we just described with ripe stone fruits, brioche, apricot, and a savory flower or floral note. There is great texture and richness in the mouth, and some really beautiful balance to this wine. I've really enjoyed sharing this wine with others. And what is your favorite food pairing with this wine?
I love Viognier and crab. Uh, I enjoy it very much with scallops and shellfish in general, but my favorite is just steamed crab and Viognier.
Well, for under $40, you're getting a really tremendous wine, and great value proposition coming from a legendary producer. So that's a fantastic value. We'll taste it now live with our group. And thank you, John.